Hello and welcome to the Last Looks podcast, a show where we catch up with talented hairstylists and makeup artists in the film and television industry. We'll pick their super creative brains and find out all the good stuff. Join me, your host, Tami Lane, in finding out what's what in the hair and makeup departments around the world.
And now, our feature presentation.
Today, I'm speaking with makeup special effects artist Tami Lane. Tami started her career with one heck of a bang. Having been in the industry only a handful of years with a few films under her belt, Tami went on to win an Oscar for her work with Howard Berger for Narnia, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Tami shares with us her career journey, how taking risks throughout her career has been rewarding, and how she ended up in Middle-earth for way longer than she planned.
Pictures up.
Last looks. Rolling.
And action.
Welcome to the Last Looks podcast, Tami.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
Now, I would like you to finish this sentence for me, okay?
Okay.
Once upon a time, there was a girl named Tami, and when she grew up, she wanted to be...
An astronaut.
You did? That's awesome.
Well, up until 1986, I wanted to be an astronaut until the Challenger disaster, and then it freaked me out. But
that's fair enough. How do we get from astronaut to makeup artist?
Well, as a kid growing up, I loved everything space, and I drew a lot as a kid, and I would draw aliens or monsters, and I just like sci-fi and all of that. But I loved like space stuff and astronomy. And I spent 2 summers mowing lawns to save up enough money to buy a telescope when I was like 12 years old, like 11 and 12. And so I've always been interested in space and that sort of thing. So, of course, I was interested in sci-fi, and I loved sci-fi movies growing up and that. So I don't know. I never wanted to set out to be a makeup artist because I grew up in Illinois, and that's pretty much, Hollywood was basically Mars anyway. So I meandered through my childhood and college years and landed in a career in LA.
Yeah. So how does that happen?
Well, I went to college at a small liberal arts school in Peoria, Illinois, where I'm from, called Bradley University. And I was majoring in arts as a graphic designer, and my whole plan was to move to Chicago, live in Lincoln Park, and that was it, and work for advertisement or marketing in some form of doing like graphic art and design. And then halfway through my first semester of senior year, I kind of had a little bit of a revelation, and that revelation was I hate computers. And it freaked me out that I'd done a 4-year degree solely based on a career working on computers. And I cried to my friends because I was like, oh my God, this is midterm senior year, and I spent all this money, all my parents' money basically on this education that I have no interest in anymore. And what the hell am I going to do? And so we went off to a bar called Desperados on a Wednesday night, and I was telling her all this, and she told me about this class trip that was going out to Los Angeles through the university. And she asked me, she goes, well, you're into like makeup and stuff like that. So going back, like since high school, I participated in community theater and haunted houses because it was a hobby. I liked makeup effects like monsters and scary things. And so I had spent a lot of my high school free time working at the theater or haunted houses and stuff. So she knew that. And she goes, well, one of the things that this class trip is doing is touring a makeup effects studio. That might be something you might be interested in. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, but I didn't think anything of it. But it was, well, I thought a lot about it when I got home. And so I eventually went into the office of this professor that was taking 10 kids out to LA, 5 girls and 5 guys. but it was only communication majors, and I was an art major. And so I went in there and like begged him if I could go.
Yeah.
And so he put me through all the interview, like, cause he had 60 applicants to go. There was a lot of students that wanted to go on this trip. So I applied and went through the process and was one of the 5 women that got to go on this class trip. So I was on it. So that's how I ended up in LA with this class. And we met so many people. I met Henry Winkler. I met Howard W. Koch, who was the head of Paramount Studios at the time. I met Sal Bass, who was a really famous graphic designer that did opening titles. Like he did like the movie Casino, and like the whole Mad Men opening titles is based on his art, his type of art.
That's cool.
And it was just this like really exciting trip to go on. We stayed on Sunset Boulevard at the Sunset Plaza Hotel. And anyways, it was the first time I had ever like seen the ocean. It was all this. But of course,
oh wow,
when we toured the makeup effects studio that we did tour, happened to be K&B, and that's how I met Howard Berger and Greg Nicotero and Bob Kurtzman. And when I walked into that studio, I just fell in love, like literally fell in love with, because it was this warehouse with all these artists working on all these different projects, but they had just finished From Dusk Till Dawn and Eraser. And so they had these giant animatronic crocodiles, or alligators in there. And then there's all these sculptors and painters and the smell of chemical, which I didn't even know what that was, and I just looked at Howard, and like he was giving us the tour, and I was like in awe of everything. And at the end of the tour, I asked Howard, I go, how do I work here? Like, I want to work. This is what I want to do. Like, I'd never seen anything like that before, or even knew it existed. And Howard basically said, go back to Bradley, because this was January. So I had like 5 months before I was graduating. And he goes, finish your degree, but then move out to LA and give me a call. And so that was kind of my in.
Wow.
So, so I prepared. So these other girls that I met on that class trip as well. There was 4 of us. So 2 weeks after graduating, we condensed all of our furniture into a U-Haul, and I drove the U-Haul towing my car, and the other 3 girls drove their cars separately, and we did a caravan from Peoria, Illinois to Hollywood, California.
Wow.
It took us 3.5 days, and none of us had any, like, one of the girls had an internship that was non-paying, and then I had this one thing, and the other 2 girls had nothing. So we were sharing a 2-bedroom apartment, like right off Sunset Boulevard, like Sierra Bonita and Sunset. I mean, the hookers were still working those streets at the time. Because it was the mid-90s, Pretty Woman was like very spot on, for what it was at the time. And anyway, I just kept calling K&B and bugging them. And my first job actually was working at the UCLA Opera painting sets, because that's what I did for the community theater. And so I did cash in hand painting sets for that for like about a month, or like nearly 2 months. And then I had hounded Howard at K&B enough to where he finally called me back, and he said, hey, look, we got this giant movie, and I'm going to need as many like worker hands as possible. Are you still looking for work? And of course I was like, yes. So I started at K&B the following Monday for $7 an hour, just like doing grunt work. And I didn't know what I was doing. And from there, it was the best education ever, because the gentlemen that were working there were so nice to me and showed me so many things. So I learned how to make molds. I learned how to like cast molds. I learned about material. I learned how about seaming and patching. And finally, because I was a painter, or I loved painting the most, Gino Acevedo was actually working there on Spawn. Spawn was the movie that they had got that was like they needed extra hands for. And Gino taught me how to use an airbrush. So Gino. So it's like I was getting educated by some of the best in the business, and I didn't even know it at the time. So it's kind of like how the rough beginnings were. I was just a shop girl and just kind of learned on the job.
That's so awesome. I know. And then that amazing situation of you just taking such a chance, just all your girls driving out and just not having a solid anything in LA, but going for it anyway. I love that. It's just kind of, you just, throw caution to the wind and do it. You jump and it pays off.
Yeah, that's what I figured like in 3 months, we all had enough money kind of collectively between us for like, okay, we can do this for a few months. The rent that I paid, my quarter of the rent was $248 a month at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working on the weekends at the UCLA Opera for cash money, and then I got that job. So I actually, because the rents were so low at the time, and there was 4 of us sharing a 2-bedroom, which cut everything in half. Plus we were 21 and kind of naive at the time. And I do think that naivety like pushes you to do crazy ass things that you don't do in your 30s.
Yeah, that's true. So at what point do you start getting into actually applying makeups?
Well, I started, actually, Greg Nicotero gave me my first opportunity to do that. I had been on set assisting a couple of the guys, there was this medical drama called Vital Signs that was short-lived, and that was the first time I was on a set, but I was just kind of running around, helping out, assisting or whatever. But it wasn't until Greg Nicotero approached me and he goes, hey, I'm going to, we have this movie in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Do you want to come for a week and like help set up the trailer and all this stuff? And of course I was super excited. I'm like, oh my God, going on location. I've never been to New Mexico except when I drove through it on my way to LA from Illinois. And I was so excited. So I went and I just helped like set up the trailer and like kind of put together blood gags and just anywhere I could help out. And I was there a week, and then that week turned into 2 weeks. And then Greg asked me, he goes, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to apply makeup. I want to do makeup. That's what I want to do. And he was like, well, at the time, like, I don't know if you've seen John Carpenter's Vampires, because that was the movie, but there's like 7 main cast vampires. Mm-hmm. There was a few of us. There was Scott Patton, Bruce Fuller, and Douglas Snow there. And I was just helping out. And of course, Greg. And he said to me, he goes, well, do you think you can do a couple of these vampires every morning? Because if you can, that means we can come to work at 6:30 in the morning and not 5:30 in the morning.
Nice.
And so I said, absolutely. So Scott Patton kind of trained me on what the makeups were. And that's how I started doing makeup. And then Greg put me in charge of second unit of all the blood gags and weird stuff that we were doing. And it just kind of went from there. So I went from just being supposedly 1 week in Santa Fe to staying the entire show and doing all sorts of makeup and makeup effects and all that. So when we got back from that movie, that was when my life changed. So then, and I'd been working so closely with Greg. So then Howard was about ready to do a movie in Luxembourg in Europe called Talos the Mummy. Mm-hmm. And he was looking for somebody that he could take with him that was kind of a all-arounder. So Greg was like, you should take Tami. She was great. She was, whatever. So whatever it took to convince Howard to take me all the way to Europe. And I barely knew Howard at the time. I mean, he hired me, but, I just kept my head down at the shop and then had become good friends with Nicotero and those guys. And so Howard ended up taking me to Luxembourg. And that's the movie that our friendship and partnership really kind of like began, was on that movie. And then when I returned from that, Howard then had, that was about the time that Richard Taylor at Weta in New Zealand was starting prep on Lord of the Rings and couldn't handle Xena or Hercules anymore because all of his resources were being in preparation for the Lord of the Rings trilogy for Peter Jackson. Yeah. So that's how I ended up getting to New Zealand first, because then after Talos, Howard's like, well, I'm going to bring you with me to New Zealand. So, and then that even solidified our relationship even further. And so that's kind of how I started applying makeup. So
that's so cool. And had you been out of the country before going to Luxembourg and New Zealand, or?
Oh, the only time I was out of the country before that was a spring break '96 to Cancun.
Nice. That's so cool. So, and I think when you're away on location and working so close with people, you really do. That's when you forge friendships that are for life. Really, like working relationships. It's quite amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, what was happening in New Zealand? Because I know you. So, you guys went down there to do what? Carry over from with Xena and everything, or
Right.
did you go to help with rings?
My first time in New Zealand was actually, I was sent down, not with Howard. Howard sent me down to do an episode of Young Hercules.
Okay.
At the time when I was working at K&B, I was doing a lot of fake animal stuff and hair transfer and punching and like making fake animals.
Mm-hmm.
So I was being kind of pigeonholed there for doing that. You know, one of the animals that I did was Mr. Jangles, which is the mouse in Green Mile.
Oh, cool.
For a few effects or whatever. So anyway, I got the assignment at K&B to work on this episode for Young Hercules called Iolaus Goes Stag, which the witch there turns Iolaus into a deer, a talking deer. And so we made the animatronic talking deer. So I went down there with a man who was a mechanic named Luke Conlian, and I went to look after the cosmetic side of the deer. And that was my first time in New Zealand. So that's how, and that on that job, I met Dominique Till. I had met Jane O'Kane. I had started meeting a lot of prevalent makeup artists, you know, down there, and Deb Watson while I was down there. And I was down there for 6 weeks. And then we finished that show. And then I came back. And then Howard was like, well, do you want to go back we're doing some Hercules stuff and some Xena stuff. I probably went down back and forth to New Zealand maybe 3 or 4 times on different episodes of Xena, working for K&B.
Oh, wow.
In the middle of all that, we took a trip to Wellington, and that's when I met Richard Taylor for the first time. It was like at a their Christmas holiday barbecue. Mm-hmm. I played softball with Peter Jackson. It's hilarious. I have pictures to prove it.
That's awesome. The stories you probably have. So at what point then do you get pulled into Middle Earth?
Well, this is a funny story. I was working at K&B, and I was, like I said, I was doing a lot of like animals. So I was working on this show called Little Nicky, like doing this bulldog as a lighting reference or whatever. And I get pulled into Howard's office, and he goes, hey, and this is a Wednesday. And he goes, hey, look, you know, can you finish up that bulldog by Friday? Because we lay some people off. And, you know, but, you know, we'll call you as soon as we have more work coming. He goes, we do have more work coming. Don't worry. But we're just going to have to lay you off on Friday. And I was like really bummed. I was like, I had just moved into my very first own apartment all by myself with no roommates. And I was so excited. But then I was like, oh my God, they're laying me off. Like, I had never been laid off before. And I know it's a common thing with these workshops that the artists just kind of rotate, but I didn't know. So I was so gutted. And so I went home, and on Thursday evening, I get a phone call at 11:30 at night on my house phone, because we didn't have cell phones back then.
Yeah.
So I got a phone call, and I answered, and it was somebody with a different accent. And he was like, Tammy, this is Richard Taylor from Weta Workshop. and I thought it was my friend Bill playing a joke on me. And I went, haha, very funny, Bill. And I actually hung up. The phone.
That's awesome.
And then a minute later, right?
He called back, I assume.
Yeah, he called back, and because Bill was working for him. Bill Hunt was a friend of mine that I met through K&B. He was a talented sculptor. He's responsible for a lot of the orcs in Lord of the Rings. Anyway, and Richard called back, and he went, "Huh?" He goes, "No, this is not Bill. This is really Richard Taylor." And then he went on to say like his spiel about like you're working where they started shooting. This is October of '99, and they had started shooting Lord of the Rings, and they needed more hands, like prosthetic applicators and artists on set. And would I be interested? And I was like, oh, I was like, absolutely, yes, sir, and he goes, well, when can you get here? And I said, well, how about 2 weeks? Because I'm like, because he was offering work for 15 months. So that would mean moving to New Zealand for 15 months. So I had to work out what I was going to do with my LA life and stuff and all that. And Richard was like, well, I was kind of hoping it would be a little bit sooner. And I said to him, I go, well, what were you thinking? And he goes, 4 days. I said, so how about 7? And he went, how about 5? And I went, done. And so for the next like 3 days, I'm like putting stuff in storage and getting rid of stuff and all this stuff. Turns out that because Richard and Howard Berger are such good friends, that they had contrived this fake firing of me. So because Howard was actually asleep, and so Howard fired me so I would be available to take the job with Richard in New Zealand, and it worked.
Oh, that's awesome. Absolutely. That's amazing. I love how it's always like these opportunities are like, no, you have to leave tomorrow. Or my first job was like that. It was just like, I think it was a Wednesday I got the phone call. My last day of work, I was like, I have to work Thursday, Friday at this job that I'm at, which was just in a barber shop. And she was just like, can you start Monday? And I was like, and that was moving cities. It wasn't moving countries like you, but it was still like, oh, I have to pack up my entire life and move it in a weekend.
That's pretty much, that's what it felt like. I literally went down to I didn't know what to do. I found this cheap storage unit in Eagle Rock, and I went to rent a U-Haul from U-Haul. And I'm like, I was just by myself. I didn't have any help. And you know how there's gentlemen outside that are willing to work for cash, when you go to either Home Depot or U-Haul. So I got two random guys out of the pack, and they literally wouldn't let me lift the finger. And they had all my stuff moved out of this apartment and into a storage unit in less than 2 hours. So my mom thought I was crazy.
Easy. Yeah. Mums always do.
Yeah.
So how was that, going down to New Zealand and working on Lord of the Rings? That's amazing.
Yeah, well, it was I didn't have time to think about it. And, I was down there, and of course they're on location in Queenstown. I literally flew into Auckland and then got my connecting down to Wellington. They put me up in a hotel on Marjorie Banks Street somewhere in Wellington, right off Courtney Place. I stayed up all night because some of my Xena friends were in Wellington. So those guys kept me up all night long, like going out. And because it was so good to see them, I was like, all of a sudden I was being picked up at 5:30 in the morning to be taken to the airport to drop me off into Queenstown. So I'm like, it's 5:30 in the morning and I still haven't been to bed. And I get back to my hotel just like 20 minutes before my car, the car was picking me up to take me to the airport. And I was like, oh, I'll just sleep on the plane. Well, I didn't realize how quick of a flight it was from Wellington. I had to go to Christchurch, land in Christchurch, and get another plane to Queenstown. And
there's no sleeping.
Oh yeah, no. I remember the flight. So I was just glued to the window, and it was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen in my life. And we were circling before we landed into this tiny, tiny airport. And Queenstown back then was not what it is now. It was a tiny fishing village. Like they didn't even have a proper real runway. It was like a paddock, and yeah. Yeah. And what was crazy, we were staying at the Millennial Hotel, which is at the top of the hill before you go down into the main part of Queenstown. And I remember getting there, and remember, I haven't slept. I didn't sleep on the plane because I was so nervous, and then I was up all night with some friends from Xena that took me out, and, they thought it was pretty funny that they were dropping me off when the car was picking me up, and I hadn't slept. So when I came into the Millennial hotel, when the Lord of the Rings gang, when the Marjorie Hamlin was the department head for prosthetics at the time. And Deb Watson was there and Dominique Till. And I saw them briefly, like, because they were dog tired. And I saw them briefly a little bit. We had a little bit of dinner, and Marjorie is like, okay, well, the bus leaves, or the van leaves at 6:30 a.m. to get us out to Glenorchy, because they were filming in Paradise at the time. I have no idea what that meant at the time. I didn't know how long the ride was. I thought, oh, okay, whatever. So I made a call, and I didn't have a cell phone or anything. So I called front desk for wake up call, right? Well, I went to bed, and all of a sudden I wake up, and there's a light pouring into my hotel room, and there was no wake up call or anything. And I look at the clock, and I'm like, oh my God, it's 11:30. It's 11:30. It's like 5 hours after I was supposed to catch this van to Glenorchy. And I panicked. And I was just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I didn't know what to do. I showered, I got dressed, and I went downstairs, and I had a call sheet with a map under my door. And so there was a map there. So I went down and caught a cab. And I made this cab driver take me all the way out to Glenorchy, which is about an hour and 15-minute drive, like through like treacherous drive. No, not highway, just like,
Yeah.
And I arrive at base camp like during lunch. Like I'm so fired. I'm so fired. I'm like, why? Like I was so fired. So I get out of the car and I come walking up, and Marjorie is standing at the top of the stairs of the makeup trailer, and she just looks at me and kind of shakes her head and frowns and walks back into the trailer. So I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So I go into the trailer, I'm profusely apologizing, and I start cleaning the trailer. Like I start cleaning everybody's stations. I start cleaning everything. And I was just like, for an hour. And Dominique Till was there, and she gave me the silent treatment. Deb Watson was there, and I thought I was going home, like literally. And then finally, after like a couple hours of this, Marjorie broke, and she goes, "Okay, I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore." And I'm like, "What? What?" And she goes, "Okay." She goes, "Well, first off, I was the one that canceled your wake up call because you need a turnaround day." And we were not expecting you to come to work like for the next 2 days, because we know that what you've traveled and been through. And of course, Watson's laughing, Till's laughing at me. And I'm like, but they have a clean ass trailer, but they didn't stop me until their trailer was clean, of course. And I was just like, so this is all just a joke. Like, and Marjorie's going, yeah, we're sorry. So
oh my God,
you can stay. You can, honestly. And I was just like so relieved. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that they did this, but I believe I did it. And I was just, I'm telling you this story, and I have the same sweat starting to happen just thinking about it. Like,
oh my God, that's so mean. Oh my God. And the whole drive out there you would have just been stressing the fuck out.
Let alone the cab driver cursing me for making him drive all the way out there, right?
Oh my goodness.
A cab to Glenorchy to base camp in Paradise. I'm like, dude, I was so scared. Like, I did not want to lose this job. I did not, but nobody told me that I had a turnaround day and that I shouldn't. They just said, well, like Marjorie said, the van leaves at 6:30 and then I wake up at 11:30. I'm like, and Marjorie's like, there's a huge time difference, Tam. And I didn't. It was crazy. It was crazy, but I guess that proved of my dedication to be there, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they got some entertainment out of it, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That's okay. I was bound to get them back sooner or later.
So did that 15 months go any longer, or were you there for the 15 months and then went back to LA?
It went for 4 years. Yeah, 15 months turned into 4 years and then turned into 6.
Oh my God.
So what happened was, we filmed Fellowship. We filmed like 80% of Fellowship, 60% of Two Towers, and like 20% of Return of the King. And Peter Jackson was kind of genius in the way he was doing, because he was making just enough of each movie to basically put New Line so far in the hole that they had nothing but to keep going. So after the initial like principal photography of 15 months ended, we still had a lot to do and whatever. So we did a lot of pickups. Like after initial, we did a lot of pickups. And then, of course, the release of Fellowship came out. And of course, it was this huge hit, which meant that Peter Jackson got basically a open check, or, a blank check for then Two Towers. So we all had kind of like a 3-month hiatus or whatever. And then we went back. I remember Two Towers like, oh, it's like 6 weeks of filming. No, we filmed that. And that was in February. We filmed till October. We just kept going. And then we started filming more stuff with Return of the King and stuff. So it just we just kept filming and filming and filming. And there was moments like in between, like in those breaks, I ended up working at Weta as one of their senior painters, like doing their collectibles, because they had a deal with Sideshow. And then there was another movie, a couple other projects that came through town that needed makeup effects people. Like there's a BBC miniseries called Lost World that I was on. And then there's a movie called Without a Paddle that I was on. Like, I had no reason to leave New Zealand, because I was working. Even without Lord of the Rings, I still had plenty of work. So that's why I stayed until 2006 initially. Then work ran out in both Australia and New Zealand at that time. And then Howard Berger called me up and he goes, hey, I have work for you if you're available. And so that's what drew me back to the US was work. And I was only ever planning to go back for a year, but then that turned out to be 4 years until the next time that I ventured down to New Zealand.
To go back to Middle Earth. Yeah, and that was a crazy thing, because I was scheduled to do Hitchcock with Howard and also Oz Great and Powerful. I was going off to do those projects with him. And then Zane Weiner and Bridget York called me up on Thanksgiving at 1:00 in the afternoon on the American Thanksgiving holiday, put me on a conference call and asked if I'd consider coming back to Middle Earth to be the prosthetic supervisor on The Hobbit. So I said, could I have 24 hours to think about this? Because I had already said yes to these other 2 shows. And I just needed to think about if I wanted to go back to Middle Earth. But I knew it was a great opportunity. And it's like going home, It's like, So I told Howard about it. And he basically went, well, you're fired. And I go, what? And he goes, well, I'm not going to bring you on to Hitchcock or Oz and Great and Powerful. But how do you like that? And I'm like, well, no. I haven't decided. And he goes, oh, you're fired. So Howard ended up like firing me twice so I would go back to Middle Earth. He's just like pushing you out the car door as you're driving, just like, just go. It's going to be good for you. But we have to talk about what happened in between these Middle Earth adventures as well, because, I mean, you went to Narnia, and that was a pretty incredible career-altering moment, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, after Lord of the Rings, well, one of the things Howard did say to me before, like when I was going off to New Zealand, he goes, go off and work on Lord of the Rings, but promise me that when you're done with Lord of the Rings, you come back home and we work together again. And I was like, of course. Well, in 2004, when we finally finished Return of the King and I was working at Weta, Howard called me up and he goes, well, doesn't look like you're coming back to LA anytime soon, so I guess I'll have to come to you. And then he told me about Narnia and asked if I would like key it for him since I was already in New Zealand. And so, yeah, absolutely. So that was our reunion job, was Narnia. We hadn't seen each other or hadn't worked together in nearly 4 years. And so that was a very special project alone just for us working together again.
I mean, and when he let you go that first time and sent you down to New Zealand, he probably had no idea that it was going to be that long. I mean, you were told 15 months, and then 4 years later, he's like,
Yeah.
okay, it's time. Give me Tami Lane back.
Yeah, no, it was, and of course, I didn't know what I was really getting myself into. Like with Narnia, I never read the books as a kid. I kind of knew what the story was about, but I was really interested in it. And he keeps asking me which was the better project to be a part of, like Lord of the Rings or Narnia. And it was like, they're the same to me, because Narnia was 3 movies that I was, blessed with doing and being a part of that franchise, as well as Middle Earth, and working with my best friend for those Narnia movies. It was like, I had no idea. And at that point, I hadn't thought about returning back to the US. I wasn't in any of the unions at the time. And that was the other thing that was keeping me in New Zealand, is because I'm like, well, all the good work is union in LA, and the work down here is amazing. And it was very hard. It was a push-pull, like to go back to the US after Narnia or to stay. So I stayed.
Yeah. So you were down in New Zealand for that whole time?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I bought my house in Island Bay in 2003. And New Zealand's my second home. So yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I was gonna just get into, I can't pass this up. I mean, how long had you been in the industry before winning an Oscar for Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
10 years.
See, that's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. So from the moment Howard and I met in January of 96, we won an Oscar together on March 5th, 2006.
1996 to 2006.
2006, yes. So, yeah, I was 31. So I was the youngest female to win an Oscar in that category. And I still think that still holds true. And the youngest person to win an Oscar in the makeup category is Rick Baker. And he was 31 as well, but he beats me by 4 months.
So close. That's so awesome. So I doubt it was something you were thinking about while you were working on the film at the time.
No.
So, I mean, how mind-blowing was that whole situation?
Well, that's a story in itself. What's crazy is, I never thought. I thought I was working on some fun kids movie. I knew, Andrew Adamson was the director, and he had done the Shrek movies. So I just thought it was some silly kid movie. But when I started seeing the caliber of prosthetics that were arriving from LA, and the suits and the animatronics and the caliber of people that were joining us from America, in New Zealand, I was like, oh, this is big. This isn't just some cheesy little kids movie, But never once in my brain I thought it was like would be a contender for the Oscars ever. Like, but I've never, even when we were working on Lord of the Rings, I never thought that either. And Lord of the Rings won 2 makeup Oscars. So it's just something you don't think about. And I still don't think about that. But yeah, that was crazy. So I had come back, in 2006, I had just moved back. The very first project that Howard put me on, because he convinced me to come back to the States, was this little bitty, low budget horror movie directed by David Arquette called The Tripper.
Yeah.
And he basically, it was basically this thing about the serial killer that would dress up like Ronald Reagan, go to music festivals and kill hippies. Like, it was called The Tripper. And I tell you what, that was an amazing, because the people on the makeup team on that was, get this, Aaron Kruger, Debbie Zoller, Steve Anderson, and the actor that was playing the guy that was playing the Ronald Reagan killer was Christopher Nelson, who's another makeup artist that I respect a lot. And then I was partnered with a guy named Mark Davaris, and Mark Davaris and I were both hired through K&B to do the the Ronald Reagan makeup on Chris Nelson, but also all the crazy killings of these hippies, and, Thomas Jane was in it. Paul Rubens was in it, like Jamie King, like all these people, like Lucas Haas, like all friends of David's, Courtney Cox was in it, just having fun. So this was a fun time. We were up in the redwoods in Santa Cruz, right? And on location, it was so much fun. So we were doing a night shoot, and I had just come in from a night shoot, and I was tired, and I had a glass of scotch at like 4:30 in the morning, and then I fell asleep. And then my phone rings, and I notice it's Howard, and I'm like, oh God, what does he want? And I answered it, and he said, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, I just fell asleep from a night shoot. Why are you bugging me? And he goes, well, I just want to make ssure you're sitting down. I want to congratulate the newest Oscar nominee for Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I went, holy what? And I jumped on the bed so high, I hit my head on the ceiling, came crashing down. And I'm like laughing, going, oh my God. I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, we got nominated. And I didn't even know that was going to be a thing. And I just couldn't believe it. And it was a January morning. And so I was staying at this old hotel called the Borndale Inn. And I had a 6-pack of Sierra Nevada on the balcony. And it was packed as snow because it had been snowing because we were up in the mountains. And I couldn't sleep. But yet it was so early in the morning. And I didn't want to call anybody and wake anybody up, like my mom or anything. So I just sat there and watched the snow fall by myself, wrapped in a blanket on this balcony, and I drank that entire 6-pack of Sierra Nevada like it was nothing, because I'm just in this haze. So then it was time to go to work at 2 p.m. because we had another night shoot. So I couldn't take a nap. I tried to. So I took a shower. I got back in the van at 2:00 to go to base camp. And I noticed that like nobody from the makeup department is in that van. And somebody said, oh, they had all gone on an earlier van. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think anything of it. And I come walking up, the trailer. Everybody's like, oh, hey, Tam, whatever. I'm like, still, I still can't process this information. I still haven't, I don't even know what to do with it. And I walk into the trailer, and Aaron, Debbie, and Steve, and Mark, and they had decorated my station with like blown up rubber gloves with Oscar, and they had made a gold leaf Oscar and put it on my desk, and they had just decorated my whole space because they all knew. They of course, I mean, I didn't know. They knew, and nobody said anything until I got into the trailer, and it was really awesome. I still have that handmade Oscar that Aaron and Debbie had made me, so that was pretty awesome. Cool. And then I had to get ready to saw a guy in half with a chainsaw, and just went about my day.
Yeah, as you do. But that's so awesome to have that support and have your peers like so happy for you. Like it's really nice to see. I love it.
Yeah, it was a pretty special thing, and the thing was I had to miss out on a lot of the Oscar celebration because I was doing this movie, and so Howard got to go to all these like little dinners and stuff and whatever, and I was but I wouldn't change anything. To me, I had the perfect experience being on that low budget horror movie, and everybody being so excited. Even David Arquette was so excited for me. He actually offered to buy my Oscar dress. He was trying to hook me up with Christian Dior. And I'm like, no, wait. I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know what to do about this.
That's so cool. I love it.
Yeah. I ended up getting my dress from Bloomingdale's for $264, and it was beautiful. So it's like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. No, you look beautiful.
People say, oh, it's, it is what it is. But when you're there, like, to me, I was just in awe of everything, of the whole, like, even being part of the live show and the commercial breaks and watching what happens in the audience. But when your name is called, or when you see yourself, when they do the little clip and you see like, it's just like, it's undescribable or indescribable of what you can imagine it ever being, you know, and let alone to win is the most outrageous thing, you know. Yeah, I'll never like forget it. And the funny thing is like, you know, The Hobbit was nominated for the first one, The Unexpected Journey, and we didn't win. Ironically, we were nominated against Hitchcock. So I said to Howard, I said, look at this. The only times both of us were nominated for an Oscar is the first time we worked together, we won together. And the second time was we worked against each other and we both lost. So we kind of made a pact to always work together because it had better results.
Yeah.
So I know what it's like to win and lose at the Oscars.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if I don't know, do you completely feel like you lose when you're nominated though?
No,
There's
you don't.
There's a partial win there, isn't there?
Oh, it's always a win. Like I use that term "lose" like for a comic relief, but honestly, it is. It's an honor to just to be there, and you know, I mean, I love being there representing Weta and the prosthetics team alongside my longtime friend Rick Finlater and Peter King. You know, it was just exciting to be there, and then my best friend sitting across from me, and he's also honored. You know, so it was an incredible night. Two different experiences, but both incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, so keying on Narnia, I mean, that must have been, it was a pretty big undertaking. Had you assisted department headed like before on something that big, or is that your first time?
That was my first time being kind of like a co-department head because I met so many people on Lord of the Rings. I had assured Howard that, you know, the people that were working with us, I had been in New Zealand. I met a bunch of Australians and I met, you know, Kath Brown, who I have great respect for. And like Elka and Karen Jackson and you know, all these like Australian artists. And I said to Howard, I go, don't worry about it. Just get down here. And there's all these people that I knew about and respected. So, but you know, like anything, it's like moving to California for the first time. It's like the less you know, the better off you are.
Yeah, just jump in. And I guess when you have someone like Howard there and you feel like you have that support, you're like, yeah, I can do this. This is good.
Yeah. And plus, he brought down a core people from LA, and they were all my friends that I had known before he even, you know, had come down for Lord of the Rings. So it was like a reunion of friends, you know. It was a very exciting time. Like it was two of my worlds colliding, my New Zealand world colliding with my LA world.
That's very cool. So, I mean, you've been lucky enough to work in a few locations around the globe. So what has been a standout fave? I'm going to maybe just throw out that it might be New Zealand, but I'm sure there are others. And what what location has maybe posed the most challenges for you, just work-wise?
I think I want to say it's the same job, which I did a job with Blake Lively called The Shallows in the Gold Coast. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the Gold Coast, Australia, like a few years back. In 2016, I think. Or 17, I did that. I was passed the job by Vivian Baker, who normally does Blake Lively's makeup. And this was a fairly physical show. You know, it's a shark attack movie. When Blake, she's basically a one-woman show, and it was all this effects, and it was exactly what I was into at the time. I love taking a character and the makeup changes help tell the story and tell, you know, what this character has gone through. So I ended up meeting Blake, and she agreed that I would come to, I was living in LA at the time. And so I got on this job as a makeup designer on it. And we filmed in Lord Howe Island, which is about 600 kilometers off the coast of New South Wales. But it's real primitive. There's one cafe with one like internet, like only 5 people can be on the internet at the same time. So it felt like the, you know, early 2000s to me.
Yeah.
So we were there for 2 weeks and filming on the beach and filming all the exteriors of this shark attack movie. And that was quite interesting. I had to figure out how to do make tattoos for a couple of the other actors because the director wanted, but I didn't have any of the luxury of having what I normally would have to do it. And so just creating that. And I mean, I had to ride my bike down this pathway down to the beach early in the morning. It was still dark out, and avoid all these birds laying in the street, like, because that was what they did, and that's what these native birds did. I don't know. It was just you had to ride a bike everywhere because there was hardly any cars on the island. But then and then we filmed the next part of that, like at the tank in Gold Coast, where they just finished doing pirates. So that was another adventure of working around doing that. But it stands out to me because that was like physically hard to do, like this water movie and maintain a fake tan with everything that happened to Blake's character. On day 2 we had to do the end of the movie, so I had to figure out like all she went through. I had 38 makeup steps. And so we actually filmed the end of the movie when she's dragged out of the ocean. That was day 2.
Oh my God. Yeah. I love how they schedule stuff like that. It's like, oh guys, give me a break.
Yeah. We were in Lord Howe Island for 2 weeks. I go, you couldn't like wait to do this like in week 2 so I could have more time to figure this out. But nah, but it was a great way to do it because I knew where my ending point was then. So all in all,
that's true. Out. So you just needed to. So was that the first film that you had department headed and designed yourself?
Yes. Well, no. I did a short film that I designed myself. It is a short film now. It's called The Best and Worst Days of George Morales' Unnaturally Long Life. The title of that short is actually longer than the movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, like I aged a woman to 2 different ages. I took a 40-year-old actress and made her 65 and then 85. So that was kind of when I started like going off and doing things on my own because I really enjoyed it. And then, Shallows was the first one that I actually had sole control over, that I didn't have a co-department head that I was working with like Howard. So then that kind of introduced me to all these other like lower budget things that I was getting into, and the same thing, whereas the actor goes through some trauma and gets to the end. So that was good. I did a movie called The Program in 2013 with Ben Foster, and I was hired by Ben Foster to be his personal, but he was playing Lance Armstrong. So I did get to develop and create the cancer makeups and the likeness makeups for Ben on that one. But I had the help like of K&B doing all the shop work and providing the bald caps and stuff like that.
Yeah. Is that something you've found to be enjoyable, taking on that role a little bit more, doing more design work and department heading?
Yeah. I love both. I love collaboration. So I almost prefer having somebody else to bounce things off of, like when I was on The Shallows, the recommendations of a few Australian friends of mine, like Shane Thomas, recommended Louise Colston because I needed somebody that had some effects, but also had some beauty and some whatever, just to like somebody that like could fill in the blanks where I felt I lacked. And that's how I met Louise Colston. And we talked for an hour on the phone. And I, at the end of the phone call conversation, I was like, oh my God, you're like my sister, you're hired, and she was when we met, I just felt like I was meeting somebody that I had known forever, and we remained like best friends since. And so, but it was great to collaborate with her, even though I was kind of the designer. Her advice and support and guidance through all of that was, it's priceless. So it's great to wander the world and find all these people all over the world that you can have a chemistry with to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask, is there a type of project that you have not done yet that you'd like to have a crack at, whether it's a genre of film or a makeup type? Or
I really love aging people, and I really love like the story of, I really do love following one character or a set of characters from one time frame to another with trauma or in between. I just finished a show in Toronto called Jupiter's Legacy, where it's about a family of superheroes, and it takes place in 2 time periods, the 1930s and then present day. And K&B had the show, and Howard sent me to supervise it in Toronto for like 6 months. And I believe Mrs. America was there at the same time. And
Yes.
yes, which I can't
I did
believe
not
didn't-
see you in the 2 weeks that I was there.
Anyway, that's another story.
I tell you though that the hours were, I mean, I know your hours were insane, and then Mrs. America's hours were insane.
Yeah.
It was just not, I was going to work and then sleeping and then going to work. So
I know.
I'm sure you were doing the same.
I didn't even know Rick Finlater was there until I ran into, it was morning. I was just coming home from work, and he was coming out of the elevator to go to work. and it was like, what the hell? Like we just saw each other. I had no idea he was there.
Oh, that's amazing. So what was Jupiter's Legacy? What were you doing there?
I was doing the present day makeups for some of the characters, like Jeff Dumal and Ben Daniels were my main guys. And then I had this ghost that I was doing. And then, it hasn't been released, so I can't really say too much, I don't think.
Yeah. No.
But I did the aging, which was prosthetics and fake beards. And I worked closely with the hair department that had these great wigs, that kind of show. But it's not whether I want to do a show that I haven't done before. I would give anything to go back to something like Narnia or something that was fantasy, I think, I love all that Pan's Labyrinth and, like big makeups that, are fantasy. But then I equally like fooling the audience, into something realistic.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think with the fantasy thing, it's like being able to create a whole world or universe is pretty amazing.
Yeah. It's like, you still have to set boundaries on what's okay. Otherwise it goes crazy one way or the other way. But I feel blessed in my career that I feel so fortunate. And that's why I'm such an advocate of taking risks, because those risks, I'm not saying all my risks have paid off, but a lot of them have in such exponential way that it's not. So like when I tell young aspiring makeup artists, I'm like, I'm like, get out of Pittsburgh. Like you got to put yourself where you want to be. It's like you moved to LA, you wanted to be in America to do these projects. I mean, you have the same instinct.
Yeah. Let's just do it. I'm just, I don't want to sound like a Nike commercial, but it's,
yeah, are you sponsored?
I'm all about just like, unless it's something that's fucking stupid and going to get you killed, I'm just like, well, just do it. Like, how bad could it possibly go? Just try it.
Well, that's the thing that, like, when I moved to LA with 3 of my friends, I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? In 3 months, we run out of money and we go back to Illinois. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. It's not that bad. So, I mean, what are some of the lessons do you think that you've learnt while working in the industry?
Well, because we're an artistic community, it's like we should celebrate each other and not like be jealous of each other. There's a lot of people that get jealous of what other people have and all this stuff. And I just think the biggest lesson is we're all so different, but we all have the same compassion and passion for what we do. And I love looking at what other people, how they handle things or how they creatively attack a certain, genre or project or anything like that. But it's also important that you have some time for yourself as well. Like, I decided a few years ago that I didn't really need, like, so many people are addicted to work. They're like looking for their next job a month before their present job ends because they just have to fill that void. They have to fill it, money, and all this. And what I've learned where I'm happier is do a project and do it like till you wear yourself out, and then take a month to however long you can take off, like depending on your financial situation. But I always make sure I save enough money where I can be out of work for 3 months after a project. Because some of the best advice ever given to me early on in my career was from Richard Taylor. And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, and I still live by this, is a good career isn't based on the films that you do. Sometimes it's based on the films you don't do. So I've always kept that in my heart, because I've been offered, things where I'm like, oh, that sounds exciting, and it's all a bit rushed. And it's like, when do you fit, and all of a sudden, it's like, there's always going to be a project, but there's always, you have to take time for yourself, and like, because it's not fair to that new project if you're burnt out on the old one. So I do believe in a lot of self-care between projects, and that's what I've learned. And I'm happier for it. And I'm more creative and I'm more enthusiastic when I go on to the project that comes next, whatever that may be.
Yeah, because you can give it your all. Like you've recharged your batteries and you're ready to deliver and get into it. And I think sometimes too that I could be wrong, but there are the odd people who do go from job to job to job, and even in between full-time jobs, they're day playing, and like they just don't stop. And with the hours that we do, I'm like, how do you have a life outside of this?
Yeah.
Like you need to have some type of personal home life, whatever that is, whether it's going on vacation or just time out, and not just be at work all the time, because everything then becomes about work, and they can become they get a little negative about, there's a lot of complaining and a lot of, and it's just like, oh no, you really have to have time out. You have to have a break. It just...
Yeah, when we work 80 some hours a week, we're doing 2 full-time jobs a week, and like for me, I'm a single woman with no children. I do have a cat, but, cats are easy. But, I think about my colleagues that have families and children and all this, and they're like working 16 hours a day, and they miss their family so much. And I'm like, we're making entertainment for your family to watch. It's like, it's finding that balance, and I understand people need to earn more money, I guess, more money than I do to feed like 2 kids, but there's also, we don't need to work 17 hours a day to achieve that, because I have friends that are teachers. I come from a background and family of teachers and in education. I mean, I was almost a high school teacher myself. And it's just, what's important. So when you're in your 20s, you're all gung-ho, and that's fine. But you do need to take some time out and realize who you are, and that I believe you should identify with other things other than being a makeup artist, Like I love to go fishing, and I have all these other hobbies, and I love to do my own paintings and stuff like that, But also, as a friend of mine pointed out, I'm in a privileged position where I can now pick and choose, which I do remember the days that you can't, like, you have to keep working. I do get that. But eventually, when you get past that have to stage, you get to the want to stage.
Yeah, it is. You do get to a point where, and I think you have to be aware of it when you're just like, oh, I can afford to say no to this job. It's okay. Yeah. And as you say, when you are working, putting money aside and making sure that you save money so you can afford to be more fussy about the next job that you take, and make sure that it's a job that creatively challenges you and you're going to enjoy it, and it's working with good people, and you're not unhappy in your work life.
Yeah.
So it's true.
But that's the thing. You don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction and take that first job that comes by. Whereas if you only waited another month, a dream job would that's my thing. It's like, it's a gamble. It's like, okay, I'm going to commit to this job. But you got to also think, if I'm going to commit to this job, is it worth giving up any future for the next like 3, 4, 5 months, whatever it is? Is it going to be worth giving up something that possibly might come through that, that you would want? And I'm a very loyal person, and I do not up and leave shows to like go to the next bigger thing, So I try to, if I'm on the show, I'm on that show no matter what happens or what opportunities come, because that I've made that decision. And being like that, has made me very particular about the decisions I make.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask, what do you find most enjoyable about this line of work?
Travel and meeting new people and working with people you wouldn't normally work with. I've met so many, and especially in New Zealand and Australia, and I've worked with some people out of England that I've met, and just being closer. Like, our world is so small in the prosthetics community, you know. I mean, Nick Dudman, occasionally we correspond, just email to just check up on each other and see how we're doing. And I love that about this industry, you know, and there's like this, for me, this family, this international family based on like this small group of people that do what I do. And that's what I love most about it. Every job is different. Every challenge is different. So it's that unknowing, I guess, that I'm addicted to, you know, what's going to happen now.
It's the variety and the... Yeah. It's true. It's so funny. I think if you can't handle the unknown, then it's the wrong line of work for you, because if you need to know where you're going to be in 12 months, then you can't. Unless you know, I guess you can get on a TV show or something that has consistency and stability. But,
and some people want that, you know.
Absolutely. I can't fault them for it.
No, I get it.
And I was going to ask, what is one of your least enjoyable? What do you enjoy least about this industry?
The hours, and also the disrespect in some way from people above the line. It was interesting for me because I started doing a lot of beauty makeup since I worked so closely with Howard Berger. He was department heading a lot of stuff for Mark Wahlberg. So I would key, but he said to me, you know, and beauty I was never known for, still not known for. But I took it upon myself to learn a lot about it and do it. And so for the last 8 years, I've been doing a lot of just straight makeup, just regular makeup. And I've come to have a newfound respect for it as well. But then it's an interesting thing when you work in a regular makeup department as opposed to a special effects makeup department, and how you're treated by, I'm not saying all producers or directors or anything like that above the line, but there is a big difference. And I hate that, because I hate that all my friends that do beauty makeup and straight makeup that work their entire career, and it's a hard job. Like, it's a hard job. And for them to have felt disregarded or just, you know, not creatively adding, it's a have to. Sometimes you made to feel like you have to have this department. Whereas in fact, they are the psychology base of, like, you know, the actor, you're the first person that your actor sees when they come in. If they're in a bad mood, maybe they'll be in a better mood when they leave the makeup trailer, because we're all like playing music and trying to create an ambience of fun and relaxation, and sometimes quiet time, whatever is required. And so I hate this aspect of what we do in our career. Same with hair artists, as you know, that people think we're like, oh, people put on their makeup and do their hair every day. It can't be that hard. But, you know, they say that same thing about costumers. Oh, people dress themselves every day. Why do we need this? But those people don't actually know what we do. And I guess that's what's frustrating. Yeah. You can't train. That's just their inexperience or them not just giving a shit. And that's what I hate most is I've witnessed some really unfortunate things that, like, friends of mine had to endure, you know, from people that are a little bit higher up. So it's, I guess, disrespect that I hate.
Yeah. And I guess it's like there's times where I just always think that producers or whomever, it'd just be nice if they, you know, came in at the time that we came in one morning and just sat quietly in the corner of the trailer, not disrupting anybody, and just watched what we actually do every morning to get everybody ready. It's just like, we're not just in there twiddling our thumbs and having, you know, sitting down, having breakfast, chatting with everybody. Just to educate themselves on what all departments do.
Yeah. Well, on Narnia, I remember our first AD was a man called Casey Hodenfeld, and he has a reputation of, you know, he's a screamer and yeller, but he's the nicest guy, and he's one of those, like, almost, dinosaur, like I want to say, was extinct ADs, where he came in, he wanted to know what it felt like to wear a minotaur head, because he needed to know, because we kept telling him they can only wear these heads for so long. Otherwise you have to call heads off and we need to take a break. You can't keep filming because they're heavy. Their sight is restricted and all this stuff. So he came in one morning. He goes, give me a stunt. Like, we gave him a stunt head to wear to see. And he was ADing in a minotaur head for as long as he could take it. So he could understand what these performers were going through, so he could be empathetic, and it actually changed the way he did things. And he understood like how long these makeups were going and what we had to do to get like gloves on, hands on, how much time it took. He wasn't fighting us. He was working with us, and that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. This should happen more often, because there's so many times I hear a second AD kind of going, the first is like screaming at me because they're just like, what is happening at base camp? And it's just like, and the second AD would be like, they have no idea what happens here. They need to come down here just to check out what is going on and why it can't be any faster, because it's as fast as it can go.
Well, I know some department heads that will get all frantic sometimes about that. And I remember on a few times on Hobbit that was happening. And I know Caro, the first AD, knows exactly what's happening. It's just, it's like, come on, right? But it's just like, it's not going to happen any faster. And I even said that to all the second ADs. Everything, I'm like, you screaming at me doesn't make it happen faster. Like, it just doesn't. Like, you're just, you just need to, it's kind of like my favorite saying is your inefficiency doesn't make it my emergency.
Yeah.
So
that's perfect. And them coming in every 5 minutes to disrupt you while you're trying to get something done quickly isn't going to help.
I wear a radio. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I lock the door and I wear a radio, and I'm like, no. I'm like, if I say it's going to take 10 minutes, then don't come in until 10 minutes. And if there's a problem, I'll radio you saying I'm having an issue. Like, something happened where I was laying down a piece and the actor itched his eye and totally, screwed up the edge, and I'm going to have to replace it, which is going to take another 20 minutes. I'm so sorry. But, that stuff does happen.
Yeah. And keeping the communication open.
Yeah. And I can hear, like, the beauty part about a makeup artist having a radio, which I always wear a surveillance. It's never open, but I can always, I always know when somebody's going to throw the makeup or hair department under the bus, because they're so used to us not being on radio. And it happens all the time. And I do believe that's why some producers or like whatever think that we're problem children because of that, because what they're hearing is, oh, well, they're too long in makeup. When actually I'll go, they've been out of the chair for 20 minutes and I have no idea where they've gone,
That's amazing. I know when I moved here, I was just like, oh, I don't have to wear a radio. This is amazing. So part of me was like, I felt free of the yabbering that was happening in my ear. But at the same time, sometimes I'm just like, oh, I need to know what's going on. So I think you've just kind of encouraged me, I think, to actually ask for a radio from now on particular jobs that are a little crazy. I think it would be extremely helpful.
Well, I mean, you can always shut it off. That's the thing. If it's so whatever, but I find it more of a help than a hindrance. And plus it keeps it. And if the ADs know that you're on radio, they can't lie. They can't lie. But plus also, PAs, they try their hardest to work with you and all that. But, a lot of those PAs have only been doing this for a year or less than 2 years. I'm not going to base how well I do my job based on information from a kid, that's making $50 a day. Like, I want to know what's going on. And that's how I look at it. And here's the thing. I don't even actually talk on the radio. I just listen. So unless I really need to talk on the radio, I just listen, and it's good. It's good. You find out so much information, and I can do my job better by preempting what's coming up next.
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of kind of going up to someone every 5 minutes going, so what is happening right now?
Exactly.
Can you please communicate with me? Tell me what's going on. And then they don't know what's going on because the first AD's not telling them directly or whatever. So Tami, if you're in a trailer and you've got your entire kit with you, you're all set up, but there's one tool or product that I took away from you, what would that one thing be that would really stress you out? What would you not want to be without?
Well, it would depend on the job, but I love my silicone beard block so much because I do a lot of facial hair, and instead of using lace pieces, I lay hair up using super baldies. So if you took away my super baldies and my silicone beard block, because then I would, I mean, of course I don't need that for every job, but I find it helps on every job. But if somebody like a stunt person comes through and you have to emulate a mustache and you don't have a mustache, and then I can make one, and it holds a lot better than lace does. So, but I love those. And I say that on my last job, I used it every day, all the time. So those are my two favorite things right now.
That's awesome. And tell me, I was reading something, I noticed something the other day. Is there something that you can mix with a super baldy to cut the shine down?
Yeah, TC100 or Cabasil.
Okay.
TC100 is you can cut the shine. Oh, and the other thing that I live by is the MAC matte. So I shove that into it's an anti-shine. It doesn't go white. It doesn't go weird on silicone. So I use that all the time. I shove that into lace if I get a sheen that every shot is different, and you look at it and you're like, ooh, that's popping. And you can just mush that into the lace or whatever, and or on the edge of the prosthetic, and you can stipple it so you can have some texture on it, and just for that that shot. So MAC matte is one, and then my silicone beard block and super baldies are my favorites.
Yeah, I think the MAC product, I think it was you that got me onto that, maybe on Hobbit. Putting on the lace on top of your guys' pieces. Yeah, and it's always in my standby, my setback. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, awesome. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, there's always, you always pick up something from somebody, don't you?
Yeah, right.
Now, who would you like to hear on the podcast?
Oh, I'm biased. I think you need to get Howard talking. His story. He's a great storyteller.
Yeah, I think so too.
And Neil Gordon. He's hilarious, and he's great too, from England.
Okay.
And Nick Dudman. He did the Harry Potters, but he also did Penny Dreadful, and he did Carnival Row, which I'm kind of, when you ask me about projects I would love to do. I don't know if you've seen this show, but
I have.
Some of those effects makeup. Oh my God. With the horns and the blending into the skin and all that. I'm that kind of fantasy work. So Nick Dudman would be a good one to talk about that, because his career, everything he's been involved, everything I love as a kid growing up and into my adult age, he's been a part of, except Harry Potter. I'm not a fan of Harry Potter, but it was great work.
Okay. Yeah. That Carnival Row, I think, surprised me. I was just let's just have a go. It looks like it might be fun, and then really enjoyed watching it. So I'm glad, I believe a second season is happening, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So maybe you should get Nick on, because he's a good storyteller too.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me today, Tami. It's been ace chatting with you.
Oh, it's awesome. Always good to catch up with you.
For links to see more about our guests, go to our Instagram at The Last Looks Podcast or our website, thelastlookspodcast.com. If you want to keep up with new episodes being released, be sure to subscribe through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, or any podcast streaming platform. And remember, if you're enjoying the show, share it. The Last Looks Podcast would like to thank Brett Stanley and Sabrina Castro. The song Fun Time by DJ Quads. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
That's a wrap, people.